Last night, all I think about is you. Don't stop, baby, you come on too. Don't want, baby, think about you. You know that I'm never gonna lose.
Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me
I came to
out.
tarot when I was like 15. I have an aunt. She gave me a deck when I was 15. So it's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
So I don't have like a practice. I don't do it every day, but I have done it throughout my life and it's been very cool.
Yeah. So when she gave you the deck, did she give you any kind of guidance on how to use it? Or I feel like I bought myself a deck probably around 16. I think I was like a junior in high school and I had no idea what to do with it. So, and back
Right.
then there was no internet, there were no like easy resources. There weren't like 50 million tarot books like there are today.
Right.
And so I was very much intimidated and kind of in the dark with it. What was your introduction to it like?
I think at first it was novelty, and
Uh-huh.
then just looking at the images. She gave me a book, and I remember coming across books. I remember I was a waiter at one point, and one of the bartenders had a book.
Yeah,
So it kind of was like an organic unfolding discovery.
yeah,
But then once I had it under my fingers enough, then it just became like a framework of asking questions, for
yeah,
myself, and so that was, I found that really useful. And also just like getting in touch with your own intuition and looking at something and not having anything assigned to it,
right. I
sense
want to
less
show
intuitive.
off your postcard that you sent
Oh,
me.
cool.
And you emailed me like it looked like an updated version of this, maybe that you had done some digital work to. Did you, is that right?
Yeah, I basically uploaded that and then
Uh,
I did it in Procreate and I updated the date to this year
uh-huh.
because that was 2020. And
Yeah.
of course, it was like I felt like we did need strength because we didn't know what was coming. And this year, 2025, it's like 5 years have passed and we kick it off here with our fires and we
Yeah.
already our city's already hobbling because of the union strikes and then the politics of everything and then now ice and it just feels like yeah we could still do a little more strength.
Yeah, we can.
But
Um,
I love the strength card because it's a feminine aspect. And I
yeah.
love the idea that it's a female aspect and that the strength comes in her grace to charm that tiger. I mean, the lion.
Yeah.
It doesn't come with brute force. It comes with grace and just like keeping your own vibration at a certain level that it just flows out. And for me, that's been a big insight this year is the role of emotion in communication,
Yeah.
which coming out of, in 2020, I was laid off from my corporate job. I was working at an ad agency and you censor yourself so much. You check in your personality at the door.
You do.
HR has you like really sort of like, oh, we got to protect the company. We can't show our cards. And
Hmm.
we're trained to not show emotion. And since leaving, that job, I okay, I go off on tangents. Just
That's no,
precursor here.
I'm totally a tangent person, so let's do
Oh,
it.
good,
Go for it.
good. So earlier this year, I have a friend who retired, and we decided to do some classes at LA Valley College, which is this community college pretty close to my house.
Uh-huh.
So I'd pick him up, and we did some improv, and we did some find your voice, like a singing class.
Yeah.
And the first guy comes up, this little octogenarian man named Larry, who's dressed to the nines, and he sounds like Frank Sinatra, and he's super cute.
Uh-huh.
And he's singing to his girlfriend April, who actually was a dancer for the Rat Pack, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was lovely, and he was so polished and trained. when she's done, the teacher asks him, "Who are you singing to?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm singing to April." And she's like, "No, you're singing to that lover who you just broke up with. And the stakes of this song are you getting her back. And you don't know if the song is going to work, but you're going to put your heart into it and just communicate with her what you're feeling, that sense of loss and that sense of hope." And he goes back and he sings the exact same song, and everybody's crying.
Yeah.
And you're like, what happened? It's like when you're being something real and when you're like emoting, that
Yeah.
it transcends your body and it, and it touches other people. And that seemed to be the theme of the whole class is she focused on storytelling and she focused on like the our our system, like how
Yeah.
we go into freeze or fight or flight, or how we have to deal with that, the
Hmm.
emotional aspect of performing and being to when you level up to safe and social when you're feeling
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah.
But the takeaway is that it's like she's like, oh, it doesn't matter what level of technique you have. If you can be real and vulnerable in front of someone, they're going to come up afterwards and they're going to say, your song moved me, your song touched me, the way you performed was so beautiful. And that's to me like that piece of the puzzle that we're not talking about. And I think that's that piece of the puzzle that finds us here today because just like, I've seen Flea with the Red Hot Chili Peppers come out
Yeah.
and do a solo and see thousands of people moving in unison.
Uh-huh.
That same dynamic is in play when you're getting messaging from, the Republican Party that's making drumming up hate, drumming up fear, drumming up
Absolutely.
anger, and
Yeah.
it's just contagious. And people don't really have that insight sort of top of mind.
Yeah.
In advertising, that's like one of the tenets, because that's what I did for the last 20 some years, is that people purchase based on emotion and they use intellect to rationalize those purchases. But
Hmm.
first you have to make them feel something
Yeah.
because all your decisions are emotional. And you intellectualize that, but you don't really see it in play because you're forced all the time to wear the mask, you know.
Yeah.
So, so for me, the strength card, the idea of like flipping that because it's such a sort of patriarchal idea that strength comes with brawn and comes with
Right.
violence and comes with, who is the biggest, strongest person. It's like, no, strength comes with your ability to connect with other people through emotion.
Absolutely. I feel like in the Pamela Coleman Smith version of this card, which is the one that is most commonly used these days and has a million decks that have been inspired by it and reimagined. And this card is kind of a reimagining of her version of that. My understanding or my take on it in that deck is whenever there's an animal that appears, whether it's the lion or a dog or something that uh, it represents like the instinctual parts of ourselves or the more like animalistic parts, if you want to be really
Right.
literal. And so that like like this is such a nurturing pose that this person is in with the balloon dog in this case. Um, but it's not in denial of that part of ourselves. Like I think that women especially have been taught to not feel anger or show anger, and for men it's been the opposite, where it's like every other emotion you're shamed and possibly beat up for, but
Right.
anger is the one that you're allowed to show. And um, I mean, you may have a different perspective on that than I do, but I feel like this card is, in a way, it's like an integration of those two energies. It's not denying the fact that we get angry as human beings and that we feel rage sometimes. Um, it's actually like coming to like a loving understanding of that and acceptance of that part of ourselves and part of humanity.
Oh, totally agree about that. It's funny in terms of emotions being engendered. I mean, that's so true. I mean, we have such explicitly specific lanes we're supposed to be in.
Yeah.
I I watched a documentary, what was it? It was a while back, but basically was talking about gender roles and how how there is no um, shelters for battered men. But when you interview women, they are just as likely to feel rage and to act out and to be violent with men. And a lot of men do experience, being battered, but because it's all behind, the sort of like the gender construct. So there's a big curtain behind what's happening. There's no resources for men when the reverse happens. But it's very much a thing. We are our mother and our father. None of us is one thing, you
Yeah.
know. It's funny in the role of in the strength card. I have this that clown is. I used to live in Venice.
Hmm.
And there's this giant twin, I don't know, it's got to be 15, 20 foot tall sculpture. It's a Jonathan Borofsky sculpture of the ballerina clown.
Yeah.
And I love this image because as a kid, I had a Emmett Kelly ventriloquist dummy of little Woeful Willie, I think is his name, the clown, the hobo clown that he invented for Ringling Brothers in the 40s, right?
Uh-huh.
And then if you grow up Mexican, you grow up with a hobo clown named Cepillín, who, was very popular, and we all had him in our childhood. And so this imagery and all the kitsch that came with that, the figurines and whatever. And then I moved to Venice, and around the corner from my place is this giant, gender fucked, male, female, high art, low art, colorful circus looking thing, right?
Yeah.
And um, I was familiar with Jonathan Borofsky because they did a retrospective when we were in school at the DMA,
That's
and they had
right.
all these wonderful sculptures and these giant, heroic, but very flat, cut out, sort of industrial looking metal things. And then here's
Yeah.
this like shiny red and blue and with a tutu thing. It was so like different. So I researched it, and he wanted to put together all the contradictions of Venice Beach. The fact that you've got these like multi-million dollar homes with a sports car, Maserati, and then the homeless person right sleeping next to them, and that sort of it's like magnified uh contradictions,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and I felt like it encapsulated a lot of my own experience, and particularly with gender, and how we present based on what other people project often, you know, to your
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
like women are not supposed to be angry, men are not supposed to show, vulnerability. It's like,
Yeah.
what?
I
Yeah.
feel like what's happening right now, and like if you want to just zoom out really big picture, is that humanity is experiencing puberty. Like we are going through this like dramatic hormonal transition. I mean, not literally hormonal, but it's like we're all learning how to deal with emotion that we've been taught to suppress or exaggerate in various ways, and also how to live with one another, in a way that we never have in the past before, because we are truly a global culture and community now, even with all of our separate nations and cultures. I mean, it's all so interconnected and interdependent. And we're really like seeing how those interdependencies play out through all of the disruptions and the volatility that's happening. It's like making all of that really clear for us, and we're having to go through a maturing process with our emotions that's very messy.
Yeah. Totally. There's an idea that the extinction burst is
Um,
coming to a head, so everything is
yeah,
expressing itself in this really big way.
Yeah.
I also feel like the internet has sort of like broken the barrier of geography. We get to, if you're interested in something, you'll find a community about it.
Right.
If you're, but you're also not you're not so siloed like we were when we were young. We had the three TV stations, and then what was like within a couple blocks of us, and that was our reality.
Yeah. Right.
And now it's like it's like fractal. It could go fractal off in any direction, and people
Yeah.
do, and their beliefs go fractaling off in the direction,
Yeah.
and it's like it's really wild. For me, it the idea that so much of it is mythology, and that sort of realization that it's all in our heads, you know, uh, and we came up with it, and we keep it alive and going because we think about it and talk about it, but it's
Hmm.
not innately there. It's all our invention.
Yeah.
And starting with like gender, like you were saying, those sort of gender constructs. And I was on a job in Argentina, which was really cool. After I got laid off, I ended up going into TV and film for a good while before the strikes. And the first project that I did went to series, and I got to go. My partner and I were in Argentina for 5 months,
Oh, nice.
and it was fantastic. It was like, an opportunity of a lifetime, right?
Uh-huh.
Uh, but what I noticed is that young generation is changing the language. Instead of OS or AS, male or female, they're using ES,
Uh-huh.
like amigas, you know.
Yeah.
I was watching one of your interviews, and you talked about how you guys is less inclusive than y'all.
Yeah.
We take for granted language, but it's there. All that is there. And they're changing the language itself, and I think that's fantastic. I always found it ridiculous. You got 10 friends and one's a guy, and so they're amigos,
Yeah.
and it's like how
So how do you
how
pronounce the
injustice.
ES
Amig
in the
it would be like amigues.
amigas? Which is
Uh-huh.
so much like easier to say than like putting an X on the end of it, which
Right.
has been like what I've been seeing here in the States. And I think for some reason is very like polarizing for
It is.
people. And I mean, I can't really speak to why that is for some people, but it's like, um, I don't know. Maybe there's like an aggression to just that symbology of like,
Of the X. Yeah,
yeah,
like formerly Twitter.
yeah, right.
The erasing of something.
Yeah,
Yeah, Latinos
yeah,
have some Latinos have a really hard time with Latinx. I use it
yeah.
because I found it was a shorthand when it first came out. But a lot of my career was in Hispanic advertising, and so
Hmm.
that is very polarizing. People are polarized about the word Latino versus Hispanic versus,
Yes,
it's like there's no. Then that's the thing with language.
yes,
It's like language is, pointing at something. It's never the
yes,
thing. And so getting a consensus is very difficult. And part of the problem is, I think, is that language, because we are trying to make these little boxes to put things in, right?
yes,
And it's like, if this thing doesn't fit in that box, it messes up my system. And I like my system, and I'm attached to my system. And so that thing that doesn't fit in the box is the problem.
right.
And that's often, where things get marginalized and pushed out or vilified or whatever.
Yeah,
I was watching a documentary about the Melendez brothers, and they were saying that at the time, nobody was talking about, sexual abuse at home, and certainly not by the father to his
hmm,
sons. And they were saying the lawyers made the argument that you can't rape a boy. He doesn't have the right equipment. And when they took it back to court, they didn't allow for any of that testimony. But
hmm,
LA had gone through so much, and they really needed this win to not look like, they were lax. And so,
yeah,
they kind of sacrificed these boys' stories.
yeah,
And the idea was that it was so off-putting to society, the notion that a father could rape his kids,
right.
that they would rather blame the victim than deal with the truth of that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's that idea that's like, it doesn't fit my worldview, so I gotta silence that voice.
Right.
And it can be as simple as language. And that's, we're finding that now with the whole gender thing going woo, all over the place. People have such strong feelings about gender.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I've been slowly reading this book. It's kind of little, it's like every paragraph I have to stop and think about it. Called Sapiens. And one of the premises that, it's mythology. All of it is mythology, and laws are mythology. We make up this story, and you wear this black robe, and a person does magic, and suddenly you
Hmm.
are the authority that can tell people if, give
Right.
people their fate.
Right.
And so it talks about borders and laws and money and how none of these things are real except in our heads.
Yeah.
Reminds me of that Kosuth piece that they taught us in school, where you
Right.
got the chair and
Chair.
the chair and the chair
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
chairness.
I feel
They-
like for as toxic as art school was in a lot of ways, there were just some beautiful things that came out of learning about art and humanities in general. And we could just like go off on a whole nother tangent about the value of that. But yeah, that Joseph Kosuth piece, I'll just have to link to it because I don't think I can put an image of it in here, but it's pretty like it's pretty on point, you know? There was
right.
also, do you remember like we all had to take art appreciation and the professor, and I remember one of the things he was famous for doing was in the very first class, like within the first 10 minutes, he was making that point and he would pick up a brick and then throw the brick into the crowd and everybody would be like, especially the people on the first few rows that saw the brick like coming at them. And it turned out that it was just like a piece of foam that was like painted realistically,
Uh-huh.
look like a brick. And so he was kind of making that same point of perception and something that seems as like concrete and unchangeable as a brick can be a complete illusion, you know.
Right. Even
Uh,
though it checks all the boxes of brickness.
yes.
In essence, it's not a brick. It's
Yeah.
an idea of a brick for
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
and it has all those characteristics. But
Yeah.
brickness there's a little pointer that's missing, that's not there, that takes it
Right.
away. Yeah, but when once and it's one of those things that has simmered for 30 years, and I'm
Yeah.
still like unpacking that idea of like, is this real? Is this not real?
Yeah.
Is this
Yeah.
something that exists as a symbol, or is this
Yeah.
something that innately has that property? And there's very few things that innately have any property. I do think like the word emotion, we can resonate with what emotion is because it's experiential. And I think that's one thing we
Yeah.
can connect with. But I do think that that's the challenge is the consensus, because we
Right.
all come with all our definitions of what something is.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
everybody's experience of it is different. I mean, just like everything else, there is a spectrum of how people experience emotion. I mean, some people experience it with like their full body and so vividly that like they replay it over and over and over. And that's what trauma is and PTSD and CPTSD, which is even sneakier. But some people don't experience it in that way. Um, I was listening to this podcast. I don't know if you remember Virginia Jones. She was at UNT at the same time we were, and
okay.
she has a podcast called My Sister's a Therapist. So she's a comedian now, and her sister is a therapist, and they have this podcast and they just talk kind of about random things. And the most recent one that I listened to was about this condition, and I cannot remember what it's called, but it's where people can't form visual images. in their mind.
Right.
Um,
My sister's always telling me about that, and she believes that that's the case for her. And I'm such a skeptic just because I'm not wired that way, and
yeah,
I should believe her, but it's such a hard
it's hard
thing
for
to
me
wrap
to
my
imagine
round
that.
around. I'm like, well, how do you dream? Or like when you read a book, and I start like,
Yeah,
I try to punch holes in it, but for her, it's like a thing. She's like, no, I just, it's the
yeah,
words that I latch onto, not
yeah. And
the
that's what
visual.
this podcast was talking about, that it's much more like like verbal, kind of like language based, I guess.
Auditory.
Yeah, and that one of the side effects, or side effects is not really the right phrase, but one of the parts of
Byproducts.
that is that they don't experience trauma in the same way, because so much of trauma is image based and sort of reliving situations by like pulling up the imagery of, something that happened in the past. So I guess that's a
Oh, that's
perk.
fascinating. Yeah, well, it's funny because I feel like she does revisit a lot of trauma, but
Uh,
it is in the form of narrative.
yeah.
And I'm very like, oh, stop telling yourself that story because
Yes.
if you keep repeating the story, but if for somebody who doesn't have the visual cues to being able to go in their imagination back to a time and place, it is story that keeps your story
Right.
alive.
Right.
So I don't know that they're off the hook. If anything, it's just a
Yeah.
different way of dealing with a trauma. How funny that something so sort of like specific and oblique is like
Yeah.
part of this conversation.
For
But yeah,
sure.
it's I read this book last year, and it's kind of like a comic book, but the book was about writing.
Hmm.
And the exercises that she would give are like, you list a topic, and then you write all these words, and then you narrow it down to a couple, and then you come down to a memory. Then you like hook onto that memory, and you close your eyes, and you're looking at that memory, and then she's like, now look around. What's above? What's below? What's behind you? What's to the side? And then your mind will start to recreate the architecture
Yes.
and the smells and the feelings and everything. And then you write from that point. And
Yeah.
you're like, oh, how weird. We have this like virtual reality portal at
Yes.
our fingertips. It's so bizarre,
It's
and you
so
think for someone
cool.
it's very, very cool. And you
Yeah.
think for someone that's like visual, it wouldn't be such a surprise. But I went
Yeah.
through that book going, this is like I'm still discovering all
Uh-huh.
these
Yeah.
things. And it's like, how does our brain do that?
Well, just to go back to tarot, I think that like that's part of what the attraction is for me, is that it is visual. And so there's all those cues in there. So you can, if you're reading for other people, you can use that as like a visual aid, but for yourself, it becomes that doorway, you know?
Right.
Um,
And it's funny because as long as it's been around, I can still pick a card and look at it like it's new because
yeah,
I don't have a photographic memory. I'll tuck things away, but it's like there's always more stimuli when you start
yeah,
unpacking. It's like
yeah,
there's more there that you're not. We disregard so much all the time that there's always something fresh.
right.
I
So
love that about visual.
just to like kind of, because we just like went straight into it. We didn't really lay work for people who are watching, but we were saying that like because we both have tarot practice in different ways, and that we would like maybe take turns pulling cards during this conversation and just like see where that takes us. So
Okay.
um so maybe, is there anything else that you want to say about the strength card or about this particular artwork that you did?
Oh, well, that particular artwork, also, so that clown was in my visual world for a
Uh-huh.
while, and it had that gender, male female thing going
Yeah.
on, and kind of triggered like an old memory. We were talking about mythology and how none of these things are real. And I used to dress up as that clown and pop up around town, first in
Yeah.
Halloween and then just randomly. And people would be like, "Hey, you got off your ledge. Hey, what do you know?" They talk to me like I'm the big sculptor from Venice. And I've dressed like that. I went to Drag Con, the first one that they had out here that RuPaul put on, and people recognize me as that clown. Some people, but it reminded me to like circle back to when we're talking about mythology and these constructs.
Yeah.
When I was at like 18 or 19 or something, I had just left home and I'd had this one night stand. And I remember waking up and the guy went into his closet and there was a wig at the top of his closet. And I felt this like sense of disgust. I was still like grappling with my own sexuality. I wasn't out yet. And I was like, oh, if I'm going to be gay, I don't want to be that kind of gay. There was something
Yeah.
sort of dehumanizing about like
Mhm.
presenting as a woman or like seeing yourself as a woman. And I just had a lot of self-loathing around the whole idea that I was effeminate and all that kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? And fast forward to like 96, I'm right out of college and I'm dating this therapist. And,
Mhm.
I've got my good friend with me and we're doing Halloween and they wanted to dress in drag. I'm like, I'm not doing that with you guys. Okay. You guys can do whatever you want. And I went into the bedroom and they locked the door. And they're like, you're not coming out of there until you get dressed in some drag. I'm like, fuck these fuckers. I'm sorry, I'm probably should curse
No,
in here.
that's okay. That's okay.
And so I'm like, oh, and I'm just like, after I'm done yelling and being mad or whatever, they're drinking, I'm there. So then I see there's like hip pads and then the wig, and I'm like, okay, I go in the bathroom, I put the hip pads on, I put the bra on, I put the wig on, and I look in the mirror and I start laughing hysterically to tears. And I'm like, this is the big hang up. This is the big deal that I'm just like feeling so bad about is
Yeah.
seeing my female side. And I'm like, I see my mom, and it's like this is that heavy weight. And I just had so much fun with it. And it didn't escape me that I was coming out of art school.
Yeah.
When you're thinking you're being more open to ideas and all that kind of stuff. And I'm already getting more comfortable with myself. But that was just like I'm like, what else in my life am I limiting myself for other people to be comfortable?
Hmm.
It's like this is just so ludicrous. And it was like something cracked and just like fell apart and never came back together. It was
Yeah.
just like, wow, now I'm free to move around the cabin. And it had to do with that facing the lie of it. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not true. I didn't get hit by lightning. Nothing happened. It's an aspect of me. Laugh it off. It's other people's shit, not yours.
Right.
And that was really, so that's another reason why I love that image because it's male and female and it's also got a clown mask on.
Yeah.
So it's that other layer of like drag. It's like it's
Yeah.
all a mask. What other masks are you wearing? You can take them off and put them on and it's an interchangeable thing and the real you is behind all of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think just like one little thing that I would add onto that is just to sort of say that like the clown mask in such a big chunk of like American culture, I think clowns are, viewed as like a goof, but clowns in other parts of the world and in other elements of American culture, there's a lot of social and political stuff that's attached to that as well, that it wasn't like a foolish thing necessarily.
right. Oh, no, and then no, I mean that's an extension of the court jester, isn't it? Who
Yes.
was allowed to speak to the king, truth to
Yeah.
power,
Yeah.
because it came packaged in humor,
Right.
which softened the blow, but it was
Yeah.
real insights. The fool was always the one that spoke truth to power.
Yeah.
And if he was good at it, he made it to the king's court.
Yeah.
And I think gay men in particular, you grow up and bullied and all that stuff, and you develop a quick wit. Because if somebody sees that, hey, you can use words, and I'm going to turn this spotlight onto you, and everybody's going to be laughing. So
Right.
think twice before you come at me.
Yeah.
So gay men learn of really sharp wit, and they learn to read or whatever, um, and I remember going to college and people go, "Oh, I'm not gonna joke around with you. I'm scared of what you have to say."
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, it's a skill of being able to like take that little kernel of truth and make it funny and then
Uh-huh.
drop it like a bomb and then, and it puts people on blast like, okay,
Right. But they
like
don't
be
know what to
careful.
do with it because it's not aggressive. It's not delivered in an
Exactly.
aggressive way. Yeah. That's a
And if
really
there's
great point.
Yeah, and if there's truth in it, then it's particularly sharp,
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
think people are afraid of somebody who is going to bring the truth to light,
Yeah.
So that's part of it too. My After I did that drag and I went on to come here, I had joined a cheerleading group in Dallas called Cheer Dallas, which was like the first NCA
Hmm.
openly gay. We went and did competitions, and there was a lot of media around it because it was out gay guys raising money for AIDS. And when I came to LA, they didn't have anything like that, but they had this group called the West Hollywood Cheerleaders.
Hmm.
And originally had been 13 guys who dressed up like cheerleaders with, in the little skirts and everything, would go to the AIDS wards and like cheer on the patients,
Yeah.
and it's still going on. And at the time, I was taking improv classes at the Groundlings Theater.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, and that was like so much fun. And I did several, levels of it, and you'd have to audition, and it was great
Hmm.
fun. And the combination of having sort of like the mask and the hair and the being there and being out in public and
Yeah.
having to be that, because people will test you. I mean, you're dealing with, you know, thousands of people out for Pride, and they'll come and they want an interaction with you, and they'll try everything. You have
Yeah.
to be on point, and it makes you very sharp, and it makes you very present.
Yeah.
I found it another sort of like channel for expression and getting to know myself, because I'd have to have that element of like truth in it.
While you were talking and right before you mentioned the groundlings, I was actually thinking like how comics or comedians are just like I think some of the most powerful truth tellers of our time.
Right.
There's been some really, really potent, powerful messaging, if you want to call it messaging, that's coming from that group of people. Um, that's cool that you got to work with that group. I mean, they're pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't part of the actual troupe.
Hmm.
They run a school, and
Hmm.
so members of the troupe teach the classes.
Yeah.
Then I had some changes in my life, and I had to stop doing it. I had another like, oh, I'm on a couch and starting over in a different part
Yeah.
of town. I had that moment, but it
Yeah.
was invaluable. And for many of the same reasons, it's like you get in touch with parts of yourself and expressing them. I
Yeah.
think for me, that's the whole draw to art in the first place is,
Yeah.
being, having the childhood, everybody's telling you that you don't sound right, you don't look right, you don't walk right, you don't, all that stuff. And so your existence is performative for the sake of survival
Yeah.
and for, other people's comfort. And, my junior high wish was to be invisible. It was
Yeah.
like, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
And to come into adulthood and then have to be like, which parts of me are real and which parts of me are for other people.
Right.
And so through improv, through art, through music, through all these things that are self-expression, then you find those little touch points. You're like, oh, I feel that. That's right.
Yeah.
That feels like that resonates.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna pull up my first card. Oh, okay. It's a Six of Wands. So for me, I mean, Wands, enterprise, distinction. It's about what you do for a living. For the most part, this is career for me. And the guy's
Yeah.
marching along with his accolades and, the support system that helps get him there. Um, what that pulls up for me is like, I think an aspiration because I'm still at the beginning uh, I've never found that footing. And I guess I had this idea uh, uh, that when you turn 18, you understand everything and you get what the world's about and you just start like functioning in it.
Right.
And
Like a
and
switch.
right, it's like doing adulthood. Okay,
Uh-huh.
now I get it. Now I understand everything. And oh my God, it's so the opposite.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more discovery there is, and the more sort of like out of my depth, sometimes I feel like, oh my God, this can go anywhere. I have no idea what's coming next. So, in a sense, it's an aspiration, but I think it's also like you have to get comfortable in that uncertainty. Otherwise, it's not, if it's an illusion, I might as well not be self-created.
And I think it's cool that you pulled that like right on the heels of what you were just saying about learning to discern like who's you and who is what other people have like a- applied to you and that you've internalized. And, it's like that card is all about just like fully being in your sovereignty and like being celebrated for that. And the fact like the person is on a horse. And so it's
Right,
the journey. It's not like there's a destination. It's like there's not a beginning or a middle or an end. It's just kind of like a continual process,
right.
of like discovery of like who you are and like also creating who you are. And, it's kind of cool.
And he's got that little wreath.
Yeah.
And it's something decorative that he's
Yeah.
parading around. And it's like, yeah, kind of. I can
Yeah.
see that
Uh-huh. How do you think that that card applies to you and your work that you
in
do?
my work, huh? I think, well, just off the top of my head, the wreath idea that, we make these objects and then we like go to market and, it's a very pragmatic sort of like, I got to pay the bills. I started doing these markets recently.
Yeah.
And the last couple ones I've decided, because I sell merchandise with my artwork on it, t-shirts or stickers or journals or like stuff, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to start taking some paintings just so people see how the sausage is made. And
Yeah.
I've sold paintings at the last couple markets that I started doing that.
Yeah.
And but that idea of like, well, that's not really the art for me. The art is in the making of them. And these are like these little artifacts
Yeah.
of that process, because for me it's like, oh, okay, that's another, phrase in a paragraph, or that's another sentence in a story. But
Hmm.
I'm not attached to it so much, the object itself,
Yes.
but the object is the vehicle. So
Right.
in a sense, it's that little decorative, thing I'm parading around. Ooh, look, something special here. You
Yeah.
want it? That's the commerce side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for me, it's been more the self-exploration, really.
Right.
That's what I'm mining.
And a wreath is an opening,
Right.
like sits on your head. And so you could think of it that way as like, that the art either through the process or the object or both, is like the opening of the mind or consciousness or however you want to think of it.
Right, right. Or an orifice. I love the circle as an orifice. It's like
Yeah,
something that, is a portal to welcome people into your world or to birth something out into
right.
their world. But it's a connection, an exchange,
Yeah, yeah.
that portal aspect of it. I do like.
Yeah, I like that
Yeah,
too. That's cool. That was fun. This
that
is
was
what, like
fun.
what I love about tarot is just that you can do so many things with it. And I really like these sort of collaborative style readings.
Right.
Just sort of like they go in all of these really cool and predictable places. Um, so thanks for doing this with me. Like,
Definitely. Well, it reminded me of I was in a band for many years here,
uh-huh.
and my friend and they were all coworkers. We all formed a band because there was this big competition once a year called Ad Jam downtown at Club Nokia. So we got our rock star sort of like
Yeah.
fantasy played out. You'd be on stage at this cool club in downtown. But at the time, I had just taken up the keyboards again. I had played as a kid, but kind of like, I had a partner who could like had a grand piano and was like amazing. So I like never touched the piano. And then
Uh-huh.
when I turned 40, I'm like, I'm gonna buy myself a keyboard and learn some chord theory. And then this opportunity came up. And it did so much for me. I mean, these guys are still like my best friends. I love these guys. They cured me of all this sort of like, aversion I had to straight men, and I love these guys. They're my brothers, And,
Uh-huh.
but one of the first things that we kind of like shared was like, oh yeah, we are at home and we're practicing our language, which is music, and we're going over our vocabulary. We're expanding our, the words that we use in this
Yeah.
language. But until you play in a band, until you play with other musicians, you're not having a conversation.
Yeah.
It's a monologue. And so this experience with you, like going on the tarot and riffing back and forth, is
Yeah.
that conversation because suddenly like you're puncturing the same thing from two sides and
Exactly.
something different happens,
Yeah.
and it's exciting because it's like, ooh, you start unpacking stuff that you can't really see when you're by yourself.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it opens it up for sure. Because it's like, it's a, everybody has their visual vocabulary that they bring to it. And so it's just fun to like to share that,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah, I love
also
it.
what is fun about art, I think, is that you have your own visual vocabulary when you're looking at somebody else's artwork or when you're creating your own. But then like you get to have that sort of insight into um to some how someone else like views things or experiences things, and that's just like the what we all need to be doing more of in this world, in my humble opinion.
Exactly. And it because it
Um,
depends on community.
yeah,
It relies on community. It relies on exchange of
yeah,
ideas and you can only do that in community.
right,
Just like in a band, you can't make, a piece of music that is collaborative until you're with other people. And it's the same with art. I mean, I can make a piece and make a piece and it can sit in my house forever. And then when
hmm,
somebody sees it, often they'll have some sort of idea about it.
yeah,
And I'll be like, I never thought of that. And that's exactly sounds like what it is. Like that's
yeah,
definitely there. And I did not put it there deliberately, but it sounds like it sounds like where that possibly came from. Because
yeah,
often, I don't know what your experience is like, but for me, it's like there's something there. And so I go explore it. And then
hmm,
later, I discover all the possibilities.
right,
It's like, oh wow, well this ties into that other thing I was thinking about, and it's looking back at it, then I discover it's not in the making of it,
yeah,
and that happens in community.
yes,
That happens when other people look at it.
yeah. I think it happens in both for me. Like it happens
Uh-huh.
in isolation. Like I need those periods of solitude. But then also I need the community aspect of it too. It's like they both bring different energies to it.
True, true. I think if it was solely for other people, then it would be more commercial. It would be
Yeah,
more, performative or whatever. And for one, I wouldn't be driven to do it because I do it to discover, right?
yeah,
To find myself or whatever. But if I show other people, then I discover parts of myself that I'm not ready to put words to,
yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like just to go back to that card, there's different ways you can view the quality of like cheering a person on. Like for example, there are certain leaders of ours right now that I feel they just want that, like that undying loyalty, unquestionable loyalty, like, oh, you're so amazing, great, like bigly awesome. And but without anything in return, without like acknowledging the fact that like there is a communal aspect to it, and the whole reason why those people in that card are like cheering for the person is because that person is like very authentically reflecting like their own self, their own light in a way that those people can connect with and resonate with rather than um, demanding fealty, you know?
Right, right. He's not the emperor. He's holding a staff as
Yeah.
well. So he's one of them.
Yeah,
And
like
he's,
the person on
yeah.
the horse is in the position of receiving praise and attention in that moment, but it's not I don't feel like it's in isolation of the community, you know?
Right, right. The fact that everybody's holding a staff and he's got a
Yeah.
staff, it's like signifies to me he's one of them, you
Yes.
know. Yeah, and
And they're
they're
cheering for
cheering
him
on
rather
their
than
own.
protesting and
Right, exactly. Right. Or cheering for him because they're cowering in fear for their own,
yeah,
you
exactly.
know, yeah, their own
Yeah.
well-being. Do you have your deck, Lisa?
I do. I brought my deck. I have quite a few decks, but I picked one out today. I like collecting decks that are artist created, and this one is the Tarot del Fuego
Ooh,
card
oh
of,
wow.
and I don't know if you've seen that one before.
I haven't, but this week I just put out a bunch of Sacred Hearts that, very Mexican inspired.
Yeah,
They have a ring around them like Saturn, and
yeah,
I used a different because it's been Pride here, and I did a Pride festival this weekend, and so some of them have like the rainbow flag or the trans flag or like these different colors circling them. So the image to me is like I've been looking at it all week.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. I mean, yes, obviously, like on the back side of every card is that image. And there's fire on every image. And I'm
Oh
just
wow.
seeing the card I chose. So the artwork on here kind of like it veers from the traditional image.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Six of Pentacles, and it's got the finger that's been pricked with
Oh.
the rose. I always have to kind of study the card, like the imagery on this deck for a little bit before
Yeah,
something
it's a
starts
fun
coming to
part.
me because it's like it's a little bit intense. I always feel like it's a little bit intense. And so, like traditionally the Six of Pentacles is a card of like of giving. It's got the man holding the scales and he's like doling out some coins to people who have their hands like outstretched.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is always a like a weird one for me because it to me it speaks of like haves and have-nots in a way.
Right,
Um,
right. Whereas the one you're holding speaks of the aspect of sacrifice when you're
yeah,
giving, you
yeah,
know. It's
absolutely.
like, yeah, I mean the finger bleeding is just like really potent and the,
Uh-huh.
ruby red flower with its eyes, yeah, it's the like it's not it's in definitely an exchange of yourself, you
Yeah. I
know.
mean, it's
That
that's
one,
literally the lifeblood. Like it's sort of like the sacrificing of yourself at that level. Um, And the coin, I don't know if you can really see it, but the thorns on here at the base of each thorn are
uh-huh.
the actual
Oh.
pentacles. So it's
Oh,
kind of
it's interesting
like
because yeah,
the
because then you
thorns are, they're and pentacles are. I mean, it depends. Like traditionally, I think a pinnacle is actually like an offering plate, but also
oh.
usually depicted as coins, as like
Yeah, I thought it
money.
was money. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. It's funny. We have the Mexican playing cards.
Mhm.
Well, they're not Mexican. Actually, the ones the Mexicans use are from Spain. I have a deck here, and it's they're definitely coins.
Yeah.
But it's like the diamonds in the European deck.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like in this case, money and being the prick of it and
Yeah.
what it takes from you. Yeah,
What it takes from you, and also like how much are you giving? Like they're like
true.
think of it as an offering plate, and then the finger like dripping, like literally just like dripping blood all over the place. Like it's a little too much, you know?
Yeah, it's
Um,
definitely graphic.
it's like there's this balance of giving and taking, um, and then allowing yourself to overgive or uh, to take, in ways that maybe you're not even aware of.
You're literally a bit wounded and you have to heal after the exchange.
Yeah.
And I do feel like art in all its forms, whether you're, singing a song at karaoke or, or you're, doing a commission for someone, you're giving of yourself in a way that makes you very vulnerable,
Yeah, for
to
sure.
judgment and to, how, so there's that part where you most literally give of yourself and put yourself out there. You're
Yeah.
also like, ooh, it's like you're opening a wound and you're hoping other people will help, will help maintain that exchange and not, take advantage and wound you further, you
Right.
know. Yeah, it's like
Uh,
this is a vulnerable position sometimes.
yeah, I think that I mean there's like I feel like, I mean, just kind of go back to like a lot of the stuff that you were saying earlier of just like, like when you're in middle school, all you wanted to do was just sort of disappear and like have people leave you alone. There's this like real like conflict with like wanting to be seen for who you are, but then when you show yourself and then maybe you're like punished because of who you are doesn't meet the expectations of society or family or community or whatever it is. And that's when you start to like retract. um there's this like in creating art or writing or like doing anything, I think anything creative where you're having to put yourself out there, there's always that like uh, that wounding that you have to deal with, of like how do I find that balance and like what's the right amount and like how much is like oversharing or over giving or like not enough? Am I like hiding too much? Like is there too much like secrecy involved and skirting the truth?
Yeah, it's funny, and there's a sort of like within that cycle of creating, there's got to be the self nurture and the
Mhm.
make creating a support system that makes you feel safe and all that, so that you're able to go out there and prick that finger and give of
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
There's people that have your back, and and people that appreciate and understand what you're doing. And the more of that you have, the easier it is to go put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been, and often like your existence is so challenging to people, you
Hmm.
know. Uh, I was at a market this past weekend, and an evangelist comes up to me, a young guy, and whatever, and just wants to engage, and I'm like, fine, as long as I speak my truth, I'm cool with this. I can't move. It's my booth.
Yeah.
And it was a really good exchange for me, I felt, because I had to crystallize my ideas and everything. But then it got to the point where he's like, but people have walked away from this lifestyle through Jesus. And then I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
wait, your premise is that we want to walk away from who we are.
Right.
I'm like, what if everything is divine and it's just consciousness itself, and these are expressions of God, and you're trying to change them to
Yeah.
one
In
book?
denial of
Right,
God.
right. And
Yeah.
I'm like, so, at that point, I'm like, okay, there's no, this is the end point right here.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, just, and he's like, well, I hope I left you with something to think about. I'm like, well, I hope I left you with something to think about. And meanwhile, I'm surrounded by these devils because I've been painting these devils for a
Uh-huh.
while. And initially, it was that idea of like, you're challenging for people. They see you as like questioning authority and questioning, you're like, you're going to burn in hell or whatever, that
Yeah.
whole thing that was very much a real part of growing up in the Bible Belt and all that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so my little devil started doing yoga and doing like, okay. And I was coming at it from like the tarot. It's a more
Mhm.
bacchanal kind of devil
Mhm.
where it's like, hey, life is full of pleasure,
Yeah.
sexual and otherwise. You overeat, drink, have some grapes,
Yeah.
it's like all of it.
Yeah.
And you are welcome to partake, and I am the god of that. But in the tarot, you got the man and the woman with the hoops again,
Yeah.
and chains, but
Yeah.
the hoops are large enough that you can always take them off.
Right.
So if you're addicted, that's on you. You've got to do the work to know when to stop and walk away. You got to be the one to take the hoop off and walk away,
Yeah.
you know? And so I'm like, okay, well, the devil's also a very popular image in, Mexican folkloric art.
Hmm.
And he's often naked. He's got like
Yeah.
the chicken foot and then the hoof on the other side. And
Yes.
and he's always doing some sort of, he's more mischievous than
Yeah.
anything, you know.
Yeah.
We have an adage that says, it doesn't really translate, but it's sort of like the devil is wise more because he's old than because he's mischievous.
Yeah.
Because in Spanish, diablo and diablo is the same, like mischievousness or the devil. It's
Oh,
like he's wiser because he's old, not because he's mischievous. And it's that
uh-huh.
thing like, you stick around long enough, you're gonna learn a few things. And then I did all these little devils doing cheerleading jumps. I put them out on social media and I got feedback that was like, I love what your art and what you're doing, but I just like I can't with the devil.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, that's right. There's people that have a very hard time
Oh, yeah.
facing just the idea. It's very literal to them.
Exactly.
It's very literal.
Yeah.
And so yeah, this guy, I'm like, I'm there having this conversation, and I'm like, why are you talking to me? I go, I got devils doing contortionist stuff on a pole. It's like, oh, but I'm pretty sure for him, it was very much that's who he was talking to.
Yeah. I mean, oh my God, I'm just like floods of memories and experiences of similar things in my lifetime, just growing up in Texas. And you grew up in El Paso, right?
I grew up in El Paso. I
Yeah.
left when I was 18 and
Yeah.
I was in Corpus for a little while and then ended up
Mhm.
first at College Station, Texas, which
Okay.
I had the same exact experience of this guy. This guy this weekend was like
Yeah.
a circle back to like cute guys would, flirt with me from across the street and then come up to me and then ask me if I wanted to go to their Bible studies.
Oh,
And it was sort of like recruiting. And I'm like, this guy is literally at the gay pride festival.
yeah.
There's a reason why he sought these people out. And it's not just that they're sinners. He's picked his sinners.
Right.
It's like there's something there that you need to look at, buddy.
Yeah.
It's like there's something there that you need to look at because there's obviously a mirror being held up to you and you're rallying against it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just like so much internalized. I'm like, I'm struggling to like not, again, overshare here and
Yeah, it's
protect,
and
protect some privacy. I will say that like that exact issue has been uh, something that I've been dealing with in the past 18 months in particular, that's
mm,
like really rooted in some deep connections that are in that sort of space of like internalized judgment and self-hatred of that part of themselves. And it's
right.
been very hard, you know,
Yeah,
because
it's
I don't know how to show up for that person, you know, or if that's even my responsibility anymore at this point in my life, you know.
yeah, it's
Um,
like I was watching something earlier. Do you want help? Do you want to be heard? Or do you
yeah,
want a hug?
yeah,
And there's always one in. But as far as the actual work, it's like that's on the person, and that's very hard
yeah,
to watch. That's very
yeah,
difficult to see because you want so badly for the person to land in a good place.
yeah,
And often what happens with us is like because of those, mythology of gender roles,
yeah,
what happens and it's the reason why all these like Republican senators end up in the, bathroom stall at the airport getting
right,
caught doing stupid shit is
right,
because we form a complex. The more you deny something and associate with the other part, that thing is seeking expression in a bigger way, and you splitting off two pieces of yourself. And this is gonna seek expression.
Yeah.
And it's until you integrate all of it,
Yeah.
we're only as, bound as our secrets, it's like
Right.
that's the thing that keeps us in shame, and
Yes.
until you can embrace those parts of yourself, you live with that horrible shame and it's crippling, right?
Yeah.
But that
I've
work,
always felt like that's such a like a weird dichotomy that exists and I don't want to generalize religion because there's a spectrum there and there's like just so many aspects of it, but in uh the part of it that I feel like I was exposed to uh as a child, and I did grow up in rural Texas, and so you can't avoid that. And the only church was a Southern Baptist church, and we did go to that just because my parents wanted us to have like exposure to it. And it's just like I never like even as a child I couldn't reconcile the message that God is love, and yet it's just like shame and guilt and like contempt, you know?
hmm
Um, so yeah, it's a tricky one, and I think a lot of people are really like the devil, like, and again, it's like not necessarily our responsibility, and nor can we do that work for other people, but um, like they're externalizing the qualities of the devil that they perceive onto other people when it's really like the loop is around their own neck. You
Right, right. And again, another Spanish adage is, lo que en la calle no puedes ver, en la casa lo has de tener. And that means like what you can't stand to see in the street is
Yeah,
probably sitting in your home,
yeah,
because it's expressing some part of you that you do not want to show the
yeah,
world. And
yeah,
that's the thing that we get so upset about. And it's funny because in Jungian terms, it's like, ooh, that's a gift because that's where the shadow work is, and that's what you got to look at, and that's where you got to start. And once you start doing that, you start sort of incorporating other parts of yourself and becoming more
yeah,
whole and becoming more, and brings you more peace. And
yeah,
that's the part where when you have a one size fits all religion saying this is the good column and this is the bad column,
right.
it's again that like binary that doesn't work.
I'm like flipping through this deck real quick to try to find this one card that like here it is. To me, what you were just talking about of like that shadow work, whenever I see this card, that's what it's all about. It's like the shining the light into the cave or the abyss, and all these like eyeballs are just staring back at you, you know?
Right,
And again, like we're all like as a species, we're sort of doing that work right now, like collectively
right.
and individually, like doing our our shadow work in some very dark, dirty, heavy ways. Um,
Right. I mean, I can imagine being a 13-year-old this moment in time and posting a picture onto social media and having that experience at such a
yeah.
young age, having all the eyeballs come at and all the trolls and everything coming at you.
Oh my
And
God,
which
yes.
which part of it do you let in and which part of it, because you're not sophisticated enough to know what you're looking at,
Yeah.
and that's very difficult because again, the emotion is very clear. That communication happens right away.
Yeah.
It's the what's behind that you haven't sort of developed when you're a child. You don't know
Right.
what people's motivations are. You
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that sort of like the cave sort of being the internalized, and these mountains, in the background, like externalized, like the difference again between what's yours and what's someone else's. I think that's another part
Right,
of social media is that it's so easy to just like absorb that energy and just like get wrapped up in it. I mean, that's part of like, I mean, there were like me getting off of Meta was like a very prolonged, gradual thing that in January, just like it was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back for me. It wasn't like a one thing that led to that decision, but it is something that I have definitely um, observed. in myself is that it's just like it's so nice to not just get caught up in all of that. Like even when it's stuff that I agree with, you know, it's just like I can step back and like what am I going to bring to this situation and can I bring it in a way that's much more grounded than just like spiraling everywhere,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
some people are
I,
better, I think, at like kind of holding their center with all of that noise. For me, it's been nice to like to have that space to sort of see like, you know, to find and develop that center. So that's I'm saying that without judgment of other people who are hurt using it for sure. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
oh yeah, no, totally. And like anything, and it's just like that, back to the devil card, is that
Mhm.
you have to find that point where it's no longer a chain,
Yeah.
where you can still walk away from it, where
Yeah.
it's not an addiction. It's like and I'm really lucky that I live in a house where I can go out to the garden and there's a bunch of hummingbirds and like whatever. Go out there and just be in that for a moment and kind of like wipe the
Yeah.
slate clean and go, that hummingbird's not worried about what, you know, so and so's doing in the White House.
Right.
They're just going about their beingness,
Right.
and enjoying the beauty of existence.
Yeah.
And you can do that too, Ray.
Yeah.
It's like so that balance, finding that balance of like it's all reality. It's not just,
Yeah.
but I do feel like the social media is for a lot of people where reality sits.
Hmm.
That's what's happening in the world right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our
Yeah.
reality is definitely being driven and created from that space. Uh,
Hmm.
so, like, just to go back to this card again,
Uh-huh.
what you just said about the hummingbirds, and they don't, they're disconnected from all of this human created stuff of like politics and culture and all of that. Like, another part of like the presence of animals in tarot for me is like, just like how a dog, they always say like pay attention to how a dog like responds to people and you'll know like what their true nature is. But like um there are definitely people in this world who are doing things that I find abhorrent and who I absolutely do not agree with. And yet they have their dog who's like loving on them and like they probably could like reverse that perspective towards me. I'm like pet sitting right now for these two sweet dogs for a friend of mine and like I'm definitely a huge dog person and yet I know for a fact that there's views that I have and behaviors that I have that other people find extremely morally
Right.
objectionable, not objective. But and so it just kind of like I think it's just kind of getting to that truth of like who like underneath that stuff we have more in common than we
Right.
don't. And it's
Right.
something that's real easy to forget right now and to dehumanize people because of the things that are happening. Um,
And I think for a lot of liberal people, the work is there
yeah,
because you have to see humanity as not us against them as well.
yes,
And you have to love people because they didn't land there by chance or by choice. It's also nurture and nature and everything else,
yeah,
in play. It's not like they chose the wrong answer. No, it's
right.
not that. It's like so a lot of it is geography.
It's
A lot
geography,
of it is geography. A lot of it
culture,
is
and those
yeah, because
ingrained gender roles and
yeah,
all of that.
and
Like,
and the silos, if everybody around you is holding up this image of reality, that is your reality.
yeah,
And I visit my sister in the suburbs and I know that's like, wow, if she were living with me, it would be a different story. I saw that with my younger sister. She lived out here in LA for a while and had this set of, values and political beliefs and everything and moved back to Texas, and then they morphed back into something else.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, it's also the news and the people around you and your neighbors and everything else,
Yeah.
the history of the place,
Right.
and El Paso, there's so much unspoken sort of hierarchy and subservience, and like,
Mhm.
we're not Cubans in Miami, we're, Mexicans in the border town,
Yeah.
so it's informed by so many things, and being able to step out and like see it that way,
Yeah.
it's hard for especially me. I was so naive during the Obama era, thinking, I am in a blue state, like that's my minority majority,
Yeah.
thinking the world is moving forward because I'm also in my own little silo,
Yeah.
and it's just like until you shook things up and you realize, oh my God, my worldview was completely
Oh, I mean,
skewed from
it
where I was
happens. It
standing.
happens to me here in like red Texas, and granted, yes, like I've lived in cities for most of my adult life, and the cities in Texas are generally blue or purple, you know.
Right.
I still have a lot of connection with people from my childhood and rural areas in the state, and I like. Personally, I would love to live in the country again, but I mean right now, especially like I don't feel safe or accepted to do that, and I'm saying that as a middle-aged white lady, you know.
Right.
So, I can imagine how other people feel, but for some reason like I feel like when I've had like and maybe it's just because it's like I there were relationships that were already established from like when we were kids and when we were just like playing together and none of that shit mattered, you know,
Right.
until we got a little bit older. And then it did start mattering. And yeah, there was like conflict that happened. But I was always one of those people who was kind of able to sort of go in and out of different cliques and
Hmm.
crowds in school. And there were absolutely people who didn't like me and who had very strong opinions about me. But um, most of the time, I could skate through that. And I feel like that has like continued in my adult life when I go into those communities um, because I am of that
Right.
community and I kind of like I know the language and then it's like everything's fine and then all of a sudden I'll say something or somebody else will say something and we realize like wow, we are not on the same page, like we have completely different values and it's a little bit shocking I think for like
Right.
both parties
Both
involved.
parties.
And and I think like that naive feeling that you're describing, like I absolutely have like experienced that like well into my adulthood because of the fact that I feel like my interactions were mostly harmonious. Like knowing that like we weren't quite on the same page, but yet we're kind of getting along, and then all of a sudden we're not it's been like that bubble bursting quite a lot. Honestly, I think that's part of my role in life is to be that person and to have that done for me as well, like by others. Like
Yeah.
I learned through experience, and I have had a lot of like to go back to tarot, like tower moment, catalyst kind of stuff in
Right.
my life where it's just sort of like the rug gets pulled out from under you and you're just like, what is happening? And a lot of
Right.
through interaction with other people and like if you want to think of the tower as like the community that's been built up and the foundations that we have underneath us that are apparently less stable than we thought, you know.
Right.
Um, but I don't think that's like I know that card scares the hell out of a lot of people, but it's honestly like I've really come to peace with that card because had it over and over and over and over in my life. Like I really think that that's just like part of my human makeup, you know.
Right. I think
Um,
it's just, and it's so universal. I mean, that lightning could have been COVID. That lightning could have been, the politics. That lightning could have
yeah,
been global warming. Here, most definitely this year, I've had several friends who lost their homes. And
yeah,
that was definitely the tower. That idea where, at least I had a friend who, I have a friend who I'm seeing next week. And I was supposed to meet her out. We'd been sort of like reconnecting.
yeah,
And the last time that I saw her, she's like, yeah, her husband is a cameraman, and there's all this uncertainty, and I'm doing like substitute work and trying to keep things going. We're trying to keep the house, and it's a struggle, and
mhm,
we're all there, me and another a third friend, we're all being supportive of each other because of
yeah,
so much uncertainty. She was going to host the following one, and then instead she sends a text with her foundation, you
hmm,
know, and then everything is gone. And
yeah,
she's like, I guess I can't host. And you think, wow, just when you're thinking that things are so bad, it's like, and then the lightning strikes and you don't even have the home anymore,
right,
right? And it's like, ooh, okay, there's a lesson in that too about attachment and about like, where do we hold our center and how do we get through those things?
yeah,
What do I need in my toolbox for when that happens next?
yeah.
And yeah, and I think right now it's like it's so back to back. I was
Mhm.
sitting here and felt an earthquake the other day, and I was like, okay, well, there's that too.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like
Like
you don't
literally
know.
the foundation underneath you is shaking.
Yes, and
Uh,
I've already had it where we have a shower that's all like glass and it's already
uh,
shattered once, and I'm like, oh please,
uh,
it's like, phew, no, nothing happened. Okay,
uh,
but yeah, it's that living with that and being okay with that because that's a part of life, and that means that something else is going to come in its place,
right.
and knowing it's also a transition into something new. It's
Yeah.
like a forced hand growth. That
Yeah.
that part of it.
I think of it like I like thinking of it as Legos. Like, it's like you built this super cool Lego tower, and then you're like, well, I don't have any Legos left, like what now?
Yeah,
And then also you
exactly.
built it in a way that like maybe it's a little bit wonky, and then all of a sudden the tower gets broken, and then, but you have all these Legos now that you can do whatever you want with, you know?
Right. What are we going to do now? And
Yeah,
I think and like our really good close friends lived in the Palisade, and
yeah,
when my family came to visit, we went because they had a wonderful view of the bay. We would go to 4th of July. We'd
yeah,
go because you'd see all the different,
yeah,
fireworks throughout the city. It was a wonderful, wonderful place. And they've been having a really tough time because of that clean slate.
right.
Well, what am I going to build with the Legos now? And
Yeah,
the consensus. It's so
yeah,
much easier when you feel like you're stuck in your situation than it is when you have a clean slate and
right,
your situation can become anything.
right.
It's just as terrifying.
Yeah, and
I
unfortunately, it's never
definitely,
like totally clean either because there's debris and there's a mess that has to be cleaned up. And there's
hmm
probably like still lingering systems that are in place that are like sort of interfering with what you'd really like to do. So
right.
yeah,
And then the psychological aspect of it, they left a bin here, and my partner and I were talking about it yesterday, and he's like, we'll just hold it. He goes, it's just a bunch of toxic nothing melted
yeah,
together. But for them, it's like you proof that it happened and sort of like a thing that exists from that time, and you got to give them time to decide to throw it away,
right,
be done with the processing of it. And it's
right,
funny how much of it is psychological
yeah,
and that's for me another thing that the last few years have been is like, you know, unpacking all the psychology of what's going on
yeah,
because it's not about what's in front of you. It's about the history of everything that came before it and
yeah,
how you feel about that thing now because of what happened in the past.
yeah,
And that's very surprising to me. It's like you change a little piece of the mobile and everything shifts, and now you're dealing with like, oh, I gotta find stability now that one piece
yeah.
is different,
Do
you know?
you feel like trying to think how to word this question. So I'm just gonna like share a anecdote or personal experience, and then we can see how that fits. But with the fires,
Sure.
like when So I've been lucky enough that I've gotten to see lava up close and
Oh
personal
yeah.
twice in my life. And I've actually seen it three times, but once was from like really far away. But I walked like right up to it one time. And then another time it was just like a rushing, insane river, like maybe the distance of a football field, but that's pretty close for a rushing river of lava. And and I was with someone who had just recently lost their home to that lava and surrounded then by other like houses that were at risk and then, other ones that had been buried by it or not buried, but just like disintegrated. And it was such a like um, complicated, like emotionally complicated experience because there was this sense of awe of like
Right.
how amazing this planet is, that that's what this planet is made of and is creating the surface that we live on. And how like humbling it was, like, and there's like a sadness and fear and just like all of these like really raw emotions, and at the same time you're just like exuberant, you know?
Right.
And the person who had just lost their home was like feeling the same things. Like we talked about it because I was like feeling guilty, like I don't
Right.
be showing like, oh my God, there's lava, like while this person has just lost their home, you know? Um, and I'm wondering, is there an element of that sort of like humility for nature and the forces of nature? And granted, I like those fires and there and like a lot of the disasters that people are experiencing are human created climate issues, and so it's a little bit different than like a natural force of lava just like coming out of the ground because of tectonics. But like, do you feel like, um, is there any of that in that experience of, I don't know, does that make sense? I feel like I'm completely rambling.
No, it does. I think it does inform people's sort of philosophy of
Uh-huh.
life, of existence, of their own
Yeah.
mortality, of their scale.
Yeah.
That
That's the
I
word.
think
That's the right word. Yeah.
yeah, of their scale, and there's definitely beauty to it. I mean, here I've my whole time I've been here, I've been in LA since 97. There's always been fires.
Yeah.
And you live with them just like you live with earthquakes, just like you live with, you live with the fires. This was the first time because of like climate change that
Yeah.
like we had the rainy season got pushed so far into winter that the Santa Anas, which we always have, and the fires, which we always have, they overlap because of how the calendar's changing. And then so
Yes.
that was the first time we had to deal with that, but we've always dealt with both. We've always dealt with both. And I remember being with Steve, my partner, at IKEA one time. The sky is red, ash is coming down, and people are putting their purchases in their SUVs, and it's this surreal absurdism about it. Like
Yeah.
we live with this constant like not threat of death, but death itself. It's like yeah, there's always this like transformation that's happening all the time, and yet we walk around like acting like our little human lives that we're in control of
Right.
everything, and it's like but it's very absurd. And
Yeah.
I think that yeah, definitely when and it's come pretty close to our house on a couple times, and so you do live with that like oh yeah, at any time this could go, and that'll inform your sense of gratitude. It also informs like when you see your friends, you know, uh, because people are going to move when that stuff happens. People are, things are going to shift. And so it makes you more present and more grateful for sure. And there are gifts that come with having nature at your doorstep, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely both. I was
So,
going to speak on when you're talking about animals, just a thought that I had. I remember when I read Life of Pi,
Yeah.
Now it's on Broadway and it was a
Yeah.
movie and all that. It didn't have the impact of when I read the book because in the book, you're reading the whole story, and you're engaged. And then you come to the end and it's like, what? It was people all along? And I can't revisit all that non-judgmental way of taking the story.
Right.
The minute that they become people, we project how they're supposed to be, and this is the good guy,
Yes.
and this is the bad guy, and people should not behave that way. But we don't put that on animals, and we
Right.
are animals, but we put that on ourselves because of all
Yeah.
our stories and systems and mythology and everything else. Again, language, you
Yeah.
know. So I think that we do have to sort of tune into that base level that we are apes. And
Right.
if we can start with that, then we can
Yeah.
make room for empathy. We can
Right.
make room for compassion, even when the person in our assessment has none, you know?
Is there any loose threads that we want to tie up at this point? And then maybe if you would pull like a final card for us, it's just sort of like, for the road.
Sure, let's do that.
Okay.
As far as loose ends, I am so glad it was like 30 years in the making to have this conversation.
Yes.
And thank you for making that happen. You were
Yeah.
also like the postcard exchange during COVID. That was to me like a brilliant idea that made me feel connected to people and people of my tribe that I hadn't even met. And so
Yeah.
I think more of this, more of people just one-on-one talking, reconnecting, that is a really healing place to start, kind of like
Yeah. Thank you.
getting hopeful and, moving forward
Thank you.
and it's been lovely. I was very happy to that you reached out. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I will just like follow that with you were one of the people who participated in that postcard exchange from start to finish and were always very diligent about it, and you were posting your cards that you produced and received, and it was really cool to see people participating in it and getting something out of it. And I mean, I got so much out of it. So, I mean, that's why I started it, was the need for connection. And we talked a couple of times in this conversation about just like, I think it was when we were talking about this Six of Pentacles, of like sort of those people who are uh, able to provide a sense of safety. And I feel like that you've always been one of those people for me, even like back in college. And um there was just never any question, of just like, you're a person that I can trust and, find joy with and talk about good stuff. And so, of course, I reached out to you, you know,
Oh, thank you. I feel likewise. I
thank
really
you.
appreciate you.
Thanks. Woohoo! It's that
Also,
Six of
as a
Wands again.
byproduct, we have this wonderful sort of artifact of that moment. And not only cool little art pieces, but also like these little artifacts of that time when we were all
Yeah.
locked up at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to a sort of salon style thing at a professor's house just by chance in Silver Lake a couple weeks ago. And it was a birthday, it was a pre-birthday because she was going to travel to Europe or whatever.
Mhm.
And people as birthday gifts were bringing their protest signs.
Oh, that's so
A-
cool.
And I thought that was brilliant. I'm like,
Yeah.
how wonderful. Because they're
Yeah.
cool objects, but also they're like what was happening at that moment.
Yeah.
And that's how the postcards felt for me too.
That's
It
great.
was
Yeah.
double duty.
And I guess we should
Okay.
acknowledge, just for posterity, this conversation is happening just like 2.5 weeks after
Right.
the big LA protest, originally started, and who knows what's going to happen in
Right.
here already. Like already
I
since
know.
that has happened, like there's been just like a million things. But
I know. For me, it was my proud moment was seeing like what was happening here was so frightening because there's so many, 40% of LA are children of immigrants.
yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah,
That's a lot of people. And LA has the largest population of Mexican people outside of Mexico City.
yeah,
And it's just like, so it's it's surreal but of course
yeah.
it would start here, right?
It would
But when
start
I
there.
saw,
And
but
I
when I
think that's
saw
by
that,
design. I think that was by
yeah,
design. I really do.
yeah, for
I
it,
mean,
it,
it's
it it
it's
met a lot of
happening.
criteria.
in San Antonio and other cities, like I've seen things, but it's happening in a quieter way. And I think that's also by design because the political makeup is more mixed, more purple, I guess
Right,
you want to
right.
say. And so it's like you don't want to rock the boat too much with your supporters. Um,
Hmm.
that's my take on it. Like,
Yeah, and it remains to be seen. And that's the takeaway of the last at least 5 years.
yeah,
It's like there that sense of certainty and normalcy. It's like, okay.
yeah.
All right, let's pick one. Let's see. We'll go for this one. Okay, that's ironic.
King of Cups. Wow.
Well, the fact that it's cups to me
Yeah,
is to
I mean,
me cups is rallying emotion here.
yeah,
Because I do think it's like, okay, well, if we're going to talk kings, at least this one's emotion, which
yeah,
circles back to what we were talking about at the
exactly.
beginning. It's like be wary of the emotional content of the messaging because
Hmm.
that's what's hijacked so many people. That's why
Hmm.
pedophilia was always part of the narrative. Anything that was so triggering,
Yeah,
it's like I heard a story on NPR and it was about a husband and wife, and she went online one night and woke up the next morning radicalized. And even when it was all unpacked for her, what the facts were, and that all that she'd been taking for a ride,
yeah,
the emotional impact it had already had on her made it very hard for her to separate herself from what, her intellectually she understood was going on. But
yeah,
the emotional part was already there. And that was what the struggle was. And it's not just politics, it's, capitalism and everything else, it's like, so it's like we think that we're supposed to trust our guts, but other people can hijack that.
yeah,
Other people can hijack our feelings. And that's the thing we need to be weary of. We need to be deliberate about being loving, compassionate, and all those, things that raise our humanity,
yes,
So
yeah.
what's your take?
I mean, that card to me is, it's the mastery of emotional intelligence. And I think that's a lot of what we've been talking about today. And I mean, the imagery is like on the choppy water, but they're just sturdy in their throne, like with their cups, not spilling a drop and
Hmm.
able to just sort of like ride those waves. And I think that's like our target. Like, I don't think it's like 100% always achievable because we're all
Right.
and we're all going to get triggered and we're all going to get like poked at and whatever in different ways. But it's like that if we can sort of keep that uh, target in mind of like that's what we're aiming for. And also part of that is like being graceful with ourselves when we don't achieve that and also graceful with others when they don't achieve that. And that includes the people who are doing really like things that we find abhorrent, like that's
Right.
not to excuse and it's not to uh, imply that there doesn't need to be like accountability, but it's like to understand the humanity, like that we're all human and we're all struggling through this growth spurt. Let's call it
Right.
growth spurt
Yes.
together.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if for selfish reasons too, the motivation is like if you're going to get in touch with your emotions, it's
Yeah,
like, wouldn't it be wonderful to cultivate love?
yeah,
Wouldn't that be fantastic just for personal reasons?
right.
And if you learn to do that, then you're modeling that for the people around you. And then that is the thing that gets spread instead of fear and hatred
Yeah,
and
yeah,
anger and everything else.
yeah.
I think there's a place for all of them. I think that we need all of them in order to be able to create, right?
Mhm.
But I think, wow, okay, well, if we're gonna pick and choose, I like the way that love feels. That feels
Yeah,
good.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, and then I just would like to bring it back to art for a minute. Like we just throughout this whole conversation, like demonstrated a way that you can interact with art and visuals and like use that as that portal and that window. It's not the only purpose that art serves, but it's definitely a cool one, I think. So,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
um,
I yeah, I could go off for another couple hours.
I know this was really fun. I always feel like that. I don't want to like end the conversation, but I also am like,
Of
as I've done
course.
more of these, like, Lisa, you got to bring it to a close because you're gonna
Of
like
course.
editing like really hard for yourself later. So
Exactly. There's got to be a beginning, middle, and end.
yeah,
But it's been
I gotta
great.
make it manageable for myself at least. So but this was amazing. I had so much fun. And
Me too.
okay, cool. And the last thing, I have a stack of photos here. I'll just like, because I just did this that talk with Jamie, we shared some old photos and that was really fun. So I just thought I would share a couple that I found of you.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
I remember
And that
that.
was from this photo shoot that we did of we
Yes.
did a group picture of Good Bad Art Collective in the style of like a elementary school photo for this article.
I still have a copy of that. That was fun times.
I just noticed the quote here. Like, can you see what that says? It says, "Those wacky, zany guys, how can they be denied? Except that they're sex perverts." So I have
That
no
tracks.
idea, like what. Like, I haven't read the whole thing, but
That
that's
tracks.
fine. It fits with our conversation at least. So
It does. It totally does.
Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now.